When my guest today looked into the mirror one morning, she realized she had punched herself in the eye, had given herself a black eye. She unknowingly punched herself in the eye, I should say. Pamela Capone is an author, actress, and a speaker who uses humor to talk about self-sabotage and the grace of God. Welcome to the Harvest Show.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have been waiting with bated breath to find out what happened with you when you punched yourself in the eye.
Well, one morning after a rough night's sleep, which is not really atypical for me, I struggle with insomnia. So I shuffled over to the bathroom sink and I looked in the mirror and I saw that I had a black eye. And I thought, what? How? And then I had a flash of memory. Although I couldn't recall the dream itself, I remember distinctively waking to the yelp of my own voice, my fist balled up, leaving the scene of the crime, my eye. I clocked myself.
Oh.
And in that moment, I had sort of an epiphany, and I thought, gosh, I wonder how many ways and how often I how often I self-sabotage, how often I beat myself up in an unconscious state.
And you talk a lot about in your project, I Punched Myself in the Eye, you know, where that all came from. I guess, you know, take us back to growing up. You were an orphan. Your biological parents did not raise you, have adoptive parents. Talk about that. And being a child of 9 children. What was that like growing up?
Well, I was the baby of 9 children, and we lived in downtown LA, and we were all split up. At the time, I was 18 months old, and we all got split up into different homes and facilities, and I was rescued by my mom and dad, Joe and Jean Shirola, who raised me literally on the spur of the moment. We were all brought to a church one evening because someone who had befriended the family was really trying to help, and they knew that we were all going to be placed into the system. So he just said to the congregation, can any of you take some of these kids for the next 2 weeks until we figure out what we're going to do? And my mom's hand just shot up, and she said, I'll take the baby. And my dad was on board, and they thought they were going to take me home for 2 weeks, and they ended up keeping me. And their demonstration of grace and compassion in that moment forever impacted me. I think I'm by nature an empathetic person, but because of what happened to me, because of that act of love, it really made me who I am.
And did you stay connected with your siblings then growing up? Are they all still in that same area, in that same church community?
We're not in the same area. We're kind of spread out throughout the states, but we all know each other, and they're all really, really special, sweet, talented, really artistic, sensitive people. I'm really proud of them.
What do you mean by self-sabotage? How do we do that?
For me, I overthink. I'm just a chronic overthinker, and I struggle with fear. Yeah, I think mostly just overthinking, thinking about things too much, and not just resting that he's got it in control, and that it's not all about what I can handle and what I can do. That it's about not really having the faith I know that's available to me.
And how did you develop that over time? Because you do get victory. I mean, you talk about having hope. How did that develop for you over time?
I'm a work in progress. I still struggle with it. Yeah, I don't have it nailed down yet. I still work at it every day, and I'm learning all the time. And
Pamela, you have a bunch of messays, as you call them, throughout the book. I Punched Myself in the Eye. Some are very funny. Others are really kind of heartbreaking. How do you see God's hand working in both of those different kinds of scenarios?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the themes in my book is about grace. Grace is a big deal to me, and humor is a big deal to me. But I guess one of the stories that I think is a good story to mention is a story called Garage Key. And it's about my husband's uncle, Pete. And he was a carpenter, and he was also a pastor. But he made his living as a carpenter. So he had a detached garage outside. It was also his tool shed. And one day he saw a man attempting to steal his tools out of his tool shed. And rather than call the police, he approached the man and just said, "You don't have to do that. You don't have to take my tools. My tools are available to you anytime." And he reached in and he gave him his key. And later that day, one of the family members saw the man return attempting to use the key, and it appeared that he was just trying to see if it worked, and it did, and he just left quietly. many years later at Uncle Pete's funeral, the man returned wearing the key around his neck. And he told family members that that act of grace and compassion changed his life. He never stole again. He went into the carpentry business. And yeah, that's,
Wow.
I love that story because for one thing, I really didn't write it. It just, God wrote it and I put it down on paper. And I think it's something that I aspire to, that I would be able to talk to people about Christ by the way I treat other people and not try and clobber people over the head with what they should and shouldn't do, but just that I display compassion and grace and love in my life.
You know, we joke about you punching yourself in the eye accidentally or unknowingly, but for other people, you know, for you it was a punch in the eye. You know, compare that to overthinking things. For other people, it's gaining weight gain, it's overeating, because we all have something that we're dealing with, trying to mask something that's, you know, that needs to come out and be dealt with. Now that you are walking through that, what would you suggest to other people how they can avoid sabotaging their lives and living in the grace of God?
For me, the thing that works is to get quiet, to try and shut down some of the distractions, and to not rely on myself, because that's my tendency, that's my go-to, to try and prepare if there's something that I need to do that's on my calendar, if I'm going to try and speak in front of a group or go to an audition or, you know, whatever it is. I typically try and just do it all myself. I try and, you know, I'll memorize things just ad nauseum, just prepare and prepare and prepare. And the truth is you can't really prepare for everything. But one of the lessons I've learned is that it's just not up to me. It's really not on my shoulders. He's got it. And if I trust in him, if I listen for his messages, his inspiration, that it comes through me more.
Pam, you've got a lot of references to Scripture mentioned in I Punch Myself in the Eye, but no direct Bible links or verses. That seems very intentional. Why did you do that?
I like to kind of fly under the radar a little bit with that. I think for me, I learn best if someone is not just laying something out for me. If someone plants maybe seeds or just hints at things and sort of piques my interest, I learn better that way. If I find it on my own, it's better for me, and so I try and do that with other people. I point to Scripture in the Bible and in the book, and I paraphrase and I talk about it, but I would rather people find it on their own.
Find out where it is on their own.
I also found it interesting in reading your backstory that, you know, coming from your background, you know, being adopted, that you are now reaching out to others in Guatemala. Tell us about your work in Guatemala.
Guatemala takes up a huge chunk of my heart. It's a girls' school in Guatemala City, and I've been the sponsor coordinator since I think 2008, and I get to go there every year. And when I don't feel like my job is that important but when I'm there, I feel like I'm doing the most important work of my life. The girls are amazing. They see me when I walk on the campus, they just start screaming for me, bam, 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 and they just tackle me, and it's pretty special. And a few years ago with the recession, we had to cut back. So we had to cut the upper grades, which really broke my heart. So now we're just pre-K to 6th grade. And it would just be a dream come true to be able to get those upper grades back. We have a handful of students that we can support, but we don't have the upper grades through high school, and I would just love to get them back. That's a critical age.
It sounds like a very rewarding ministry that you have there. Thank you so much for joining us, Pam.
Oh, sure.
To connect with Pamela, go to PamelaCapone.com or go to harvest-tv.com for a link to her new project. It's called I Punched Myself in the Eye. Coming up later, Brian Bush with the latest news from Israel. But up next, Pastor Mark Lance offers practical principles for resolving conflict. We'll be right back.